And I didn't know how deeply this trauma was rooted in me.
Well, what I would say is that, first of all, your unconscious mind is there to keep you breathing, right? Fundamentally, your mind is there to keep you alive, right? And whatever it needs to do to make that happen is what it's going to do. All right. So for guys who are in that space who have essentially given up, just given up entirely, just said, the hell with it, this isn't worth it anymore. That is a survival mechanism. Okay. They've essentially got to the point where, at least, let me put it this way, I've seen in a number of cases where guys have previously gotten to the point where they just wanted to give up entirely, where they're looking for that permanent solution to the temporary problem, right? Where they are that level of despair. And when you get there, there's a mechanism that kicks in and says, okay, whatever I have to do to keep you breathing is what I'll do. So if they can blame their failure on this external factor that's unchangeable and immutable, then it's not their fault.
Yeah.
Right. And it's okay to give up. It's okay to not want that anymore. It's okay to build a life without that because
it's cope.
not their fault.
It's the ultimate cope.
It's the ultimate cope, but it's there to keep them breathing. Right.
Right.
And if they actually had to confront the fact that it's not this factor, it's them, then all of a sudden they would be responsible for the misery and everything else. And that would be one of those moments where it might not be cope anymore. It might be rope. So I don't blame them for getting stuck in this loop. It's there to keep them breathing. Right. Now, are there ways out of that? Absolutely. Do they have to have the right support and everything else to be able to do that? Absolutely. Is what they're saying true? Sort of, but probably not really. It's
not absolute.
It's not absolute. It's choosing whatever external factor they can point to that they can't control as the thing that is putting them in misery so that they don't have to accept responsibility, because if they did, they would not be able to cope anymore. Right.
Right.
And in order to stay breathing, their mind says, okay, we're just going to keep coping because at least then we're still breathing. If you're still breathing, you got options, right? But trying to get through to somebody like that who's in that loop, especially from the conscious mind process, is incredibly difficult because that's your defense against giving up entirely, right? So I don't blame them for being there. I don't blame them for being as argumentative. I don't blame them for not being able to see things outside of that, because that's how they're staying, keeping functioning, right? That's their last lifeline. Fair enough, right? Is it sad? Absolutely. Are there better ways? Absolutely. Are there ways out? Absolutely. Is that stuff incredibly difficult? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Absolutely is.
And if you if you look at some of these streams when the guys turn on the camera, look, you look at a guy like you and I, you can tell like, okay, these guys are definitely, if you have a sense about you can look at them like, these are strong men. These are guys that like, they have some balls about them. They have some fucking dignity about them, some confidence. But when you have like these, like, it's sad to say, but like these little fucking weaselly looking dudes, and it's just like, a weak exterior is a reflection of a weak interior. Yeah. And again, it all goes back to these guys in the black pill and also guys in the red pill space. Like, they're high function. Do you like to say like highly functioning fuck ups? Like a guy like I fucked 300 girls, but I still hate myself. Yes. And so it's just different levels of how fucked up people are, and different levels of ascension out of this abyss. Like, I'm very, people look at me like a role model. You think he's traveling the world, he's got girls, he's got money, he's doing everything, he's good looking. But I still have shit that I, like Ryan knows. Like I had a session with Ryan, and this was like probably about a month ago, and I didn't know how deeply this trauma was rooted in me.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd been working with Ryan Fowler for a long time, and he couldn't get it out. But with Ryan Christensen here, I ended up bawling and crying, like weeping in my living room floor. And it was the best feeling ever. Because when I sat up, and it was done. I was just like, I feel free. I felt like shackles were taken off of me, and a certain angst, a certain hatred, a certain weight, a literal psychological weight that was manifesting itself physically was taken off of me. I was just like, Jesus Christ. Like, so what we're trying to tell you is like, we're not like some almighty God's like, blessing down upon you. But we are saying that everybody has these traumas, and you can heal them. And I think this is we're at the forefront of the future of human evolution and human psychological healing, because the APA common psychology shit right now, they just want to drug you up.
So, oh man, so much to cover in that. Like, number one, You talked about, being, starting that like Weasley space and stuff like that, and all these guys who have a much more submissive demeanor, like a weak demeanor, right? Like they're physically weak, they're mentally weak, they're in on themselves, right? Like most of us here have been there, right?
Yeah.
I was the nerdy kid growing up who didn't have friends. I was the guy that was hanging around in my house playing with my computer. I got my first computer in 1979. Thank you very much. I've been doing this shit longer than you have, so I'm an OG computer geek, right? So, like, I've been there. Like, I'm not the way I am now just because I was born this way. No, I had to learn a lot of crap along the way and had take a lot of hits, right? I've made more mistakes than I can possibly count in my life to get to where I'm at, right? And I've had to do a lot of hard work and let a lot of stuff go in order to become who I am now. And I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. There's still a lot of things that I'm working on. The other thing I'll say is that the strategies that our mind comes up with to keep us alive can actually be incredibly productive in different ways, even if they're messed up. So, for example, we're talking about the black pillars and stuff and how they'd essentially got to the point where they'd given up. I've been there before myself, and when you think you're fundamentally worthless, there is, your mind has to come up with some way to say, okay, you're worthwhile, so you can keep on going, right? When I was growing up, I read a lot of fantasy novels, a lot of sci-fi novels, a lot of military fiction novels. So there's always this idea of the heroic sacrifice, right? The hero is the one who sacrifices himself for others. So
Right.
essentially, I created this framework for myself where, if I sacrifice myself for others, if I sacrifice myself for the greater good, then I have value, and then my life is worth living, which is awesome in a lot of ways, right? It's why I spent 23 years doing what I did, serving my country. It's why I spent, it's why I'm doing this now in a lot of ways.
23
Is
years in the
23
military.
years, well,
20.
23 years in between military and as a government contractor, right? So
Jesus. How long
doing
were you in
like
the
military
military?
stuff.
Military.
11 years in the military and been a contractor for 16 years. So there was some overlap there.
Fuck, that is
So
gangster. I didn't know you were that long.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
awesome.
So, my entire life has been about serving my country, serving people greater than me, serving that common good, right?
Right.
The problem with that is that there's no room in there for me to have what I want.